If you've ever felt behind or believed it was too late to change your financial future, stay with us. This episode will rewrite the way you think. Welcome to the Glovisor Podcast, where we explore leadership, communication, business growth, and personal development through real conversations with people that make an impact. At 63, our guest was fired and 2 years away from running out of money. At 69, he was a millionaire. His secret wasn't luck, timing, or a high-paying job. It was a system he created out of desperation. Today, he's breaking down the wealth compass that's helping everyday people accelerate wealth at a fraction of the time. If you want a financial plan that actually works, no matter what your age is, this conversation is your turning point. Glovisor welcomes David Nassief.
Thank you, Joe. I was thrilled to be here with you today. Appreciate the opportunity.
Pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Take us back to the moment where everything changed. Take us back to what was happening in your life when the financial crisis hit you.
Sure. Well, I just got fired after 18 years with the same company. I was 63 years old. I would not wish that day on anybody. I did the math, Joe, and if we drained all of our savings and all of our retirement, we were scheduled to be broke by 65. And at this point, I'm thinking, who is going to hire me at my age? But that wasn't even the hardest part. The hardest part was driving home thinking, how am I going to tell my wife, Mary? We'd been married for 30 years, and she did not deserve the mess I just threw our life into. So anyways, my heart wasn't in it, but I started applying for jobs. I did not want to go back to the corporate world. That was the last place I wanted to be, but I had to keep a roof over my head. I had to put food on the table, so I had to work. But, as I interviewed with companies, and I didn't get very many interviews, to be honest with you, most people didn't want to even talk to me, but the few I got, it was pretty obvious to me. They didn't say it in these exact words, but basically their message was, no, the company that fired you, they did the right thing. You're of no value to us either. And you're washed up after 63, basically, very politely, of course. And I knew that, I just knew that what I was hearing from them, I was not going to get a job in the corporate world. And so I decided I would hire myself and start my own company. That was not easy to do, though, Joey, because I had failed trying to do it twice in my 40s. So I had emotional scars here. But when your back's against the wall and you got no other options, you say, okay, I'm going to give this a try. This time was smarter, though, because I learned some very important lessons when I failed the first two times, and I wasn't going to repeat those mistakes again. Anyways, so I got a job as an independent sales agent on straight commission, no salary, no safety net, no benefits whatsoever. First months were brutal, cold calls, constant rejection, rookie mistakes. I heard more no's in that couple-month period than I think I ever heard in my life. But, as I look back on that, Joe, I didn't experience it at the time, but as I look back on it, I realized something important. All those no's, all that rejection I was getting, I believe, was helping me build the mental muscles I needed to punch through that dark period of my life. After 10 months of grinding, and I do mean grinding, I had an incredible milestone. I was suddenly making more money than my good-paying six-figure corporate salary. And for a brief moment, I felt like we made it. But then I realized we didn't make nothing because I had been making decent money for 40 years. Look where it got me, on the verge of financial collapse. I said, I have to learn how to invest. I have to learn how to build wealth. And obviously, I was a failure at that, too, for 40 years, especially when you're making decent money. So I didn't have time for a bunch of theories and people on commissions trying to get their cut of my income. So I decided to do it myself. I read 21 books on personal finance, listened to 13 podcasts faithfully, read blogs, newsletters. Every time I got a good idea, I put it on a piece of paper. I kept putting it on this piece of paper. And then I kept refining the paper. I kept refining it down to one piece of paper and till I got to a set it and forget it approach, because I couldn't be worried about Wall Street. I had a company to try to, keep going and get strong. And so anyways, after 6 years, I did what I thought was impossible. From terrified of being broke to a 7-figure portfolio and real financial freedom. Joe, I now know it is never too late to rewrite your story, because if I can pull that off starting as late as 63, anybody can, I believe, with the right direction.
Wow, what a story. I love it. But you mentioned something there, 30, 40 years to the traditional way of creating wealth. So what made you question that? What made you say, listen, I don't have the time for this?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was my results. When you're 63 and you've made good money for that most of that 40-year period, well above the average household income. I mean, I had some bad years, but as everyone does typically, but most of them were really good. And you've got nothing to show for it. The math just tells you you're an idiot when it comes to investing and building wealth. I mean, let's just be honest with you. But you know what helped me a lot, Joe, was the same time I was going through this nightmare of getting fired and trying to whatever recover. I heard a true story that really changed my whole outlook. And basically, I'll share with you very briefly. Scientists at the Max Planck Institute did an experiment. What they did is they put people in the center of a dense German forest and they told them to walk in a straight line to the edge. Now, these were confident and capable people, but when the clouds covered the sun and they lost their point of reference, the GPS tracking devices they were wearing showed they were gradually starting to walk in circular motions. Some of them were actually ending up right back where they began, and yet each and every one of them was absolutely convinced they were walking in a perfectly straight line the entire time. Joe, that is me for 40 years. I was working hard, making good money, doing what I thought was the right thing when it came to investing, but literally just walking in a circle. That told me that day when I read that story, I said, that's what I need, a compass, not a not a metal compass like travelers use, but a one-page compass to keep me focused because I'm the kind of guy, Joe, I get distracted easy with shiny objects and hot tips, and I'm off to the races in the wrong direction. I couldn't do that anymore. My runway was too short. My runway was more like a helicopter pad than a runway. I didn't have the time to make those same mistakes I did for 40 years. And so what that did is it gave me the 30,000 foot view, that one page, to stay on the straight and narrow and not waste time and make the most of my time and get to the financial independence in the shortest possible way, but safely. That was really important to me too, safely.
And I can't wait to find out about that one pager. So now here you are trying to decide what your future is going to be. You hear this great story, which by the way, I love. And I think there's so many lessons within that story. Did you decide on a specific investment style, industry? Because very often we have individuals that we talk to in coaching and that we meet along the way that they have the paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
So how did you go beyond that point?
Well, basically, when I started reading the books, the first couple of books I'll read, and I didn't count these as part of the 21, they were worthless. I could see right through the conflict of interest they had. They were trying to pitch me on something, and they did it very good and very slickly. I mean, they are very professional. And if my antennas weren't up on, wait a minute, one of my principles on my compass that I got really early is follow the money. In other words, find out how people are getting paid that are giving you advice. Okay, and that really helped open my eyes. So the first two books I just threw away. I mean, I didn't even start them. But then I started reading books by people who were leaders in the industry, had amassed billions of dollars in their either the money they managed or multi-millions of what they owned. And these are people without conflicts of interest because they weren't pitching anything. There was no pitch. They were just trying to show people the way to do it. And I would pick up ideas from them. And this guru had a really good idea I loved, and he had no conflict. This one had, but the fun thing about this show is in these 21 books I read, they all had some really good ideas, but each one of them had their own golden nugget. And that's why I felt I needed my compass because there was no one place they were all lodged, where you could go to, but they had some really good stuff. And so that's why I says, I need to keep these in one spot so I don't get off track and I can stay focused on the right thing. And that really helped me. Let me tell you one thing that really surprises people. And in that 6 year period, I doubled my portfolio 3 times. Now, most
Oh.
people in investments say, Dave, that's not possible. The market didn't increase that much. You're either delusional or you're a liar. I promise you, I'm neither one of those. But let me just tell you one thing. First of all, I wasn't day trading. I wasn't trying to time the market or chase crypto. I was actually doing the opposite of that. I was doing something that's so boring it would put you to sleep. And here's the crazy thing, Joe. When the market was down, I was thrilled. When other people were panicking and selling, I was buying more shares at discount prices. My only regret was the market wasn't down more during that 6 year period, because if it was, I'd have done even better than I had done. But what really surprised me was the math. There's a thing called the rule of 72. And basically what it says is, say you're getting a 10% return on your money. It works for any return, but just say 10%, okay? Then basically your money will double every 7.2 years or roughly every 86 months. My first double, once I got the compass in place and started following it, understood what was going on with the market, my first double was just in 30 months. The second one, 13 months. The third one was 29 months, which was an average of 24 months which is way less than half the 86-month time period. But my secret wasn't the returns. I was doing 3 things I finally figured out that I hadn't figured out for 40 years. The first thing was when I got paid, I pay myself once a month. I took the money right off the top that I was going to put away, put aside for savings and investing. Before I paid a single bill, it wasn't even in my account for 24 hours, maybe like 10 hours, a few hours, and get it out. I want to get out of there because I didn't want to be tempted. The second thing was I put it in the right kind of investments. And from my research, I found for me was the best was low cost index funds. Okay. I only own two of them, Joe. That's how simple this is.
Wow.
One of them is the total US market. I own every publicly traded stock in the United States. My other fund is every publicly traded stock outside the United States. So, Joe, I literally own every publicly traded stock on the planet. For me
Wow.
to go broke to zero, the entire world economic system would have to collapse to nothing. And if that happens, we got bigger problems than money, I think. Okay. So I sleep really good at night. I'm not worried about that. But the third thing I understood, and this is really critical, was I learned to use market volatility to work for me instead of against me. Too many people, they invest on their emotions and they buy high and sell low, which is the opposite of what you want to do. Once I figured that out, my whole worldview when it comes to money changed. So many people, picture yourself going to a department store and seeing a sign, 50% off. Would you ever go up to the clerk and say, hey, I don't want to pay no 50% off. You tell me when the thing's going back to full retail. I only buy full retail. That's why I buy. You wouldn't do that. They think you were crazy. But yet every day, that's what people do in the stock market. Oh my gosh, the market's down 20, 30, 50%. I got to get my money out. Got to get in the cash. No, that's when you want to buy. That's when the deals are. And that's crazy thinking that people think smart when they're in the store buying stuff, but their brain gets like reversed when they go into investing. It's just kind of weird how that happens. So basically, I was at the end of the cycle of buying high and selling low. I was able to build my wealth twice as fast with half the risk compared to how most people do it and compare how I was doing it for 40 years. And Joe, that made all the difference. It really did.
Collectively, you took all of those 21 golden nuggets that you,
Yeah.
you captured in those books
Yeah.
and you wrote it down all in one page.
Yep. One page. And then the reason I wrote the book to go with it is because there's details that you need on some of those points. You just can't, it's good to say the point to keep your mind focused, but if you're going through the first time or you're having trouble with some, then the book is irrelevant. Can I just show you the one page? Because I'm going to give it to all your listeners for free. So I'm not pitching anything here. Okay. This is the actual compass. Okay. And basically on one side of it is the 9 trail markers, and it'll get you from wherever you are to financial freedom. Okay. And 9 simple steps. And basically, most of the books I read, Joe, they didn't even talk about this first one, career and income success. I guess they assumed that if you were reading their book, you were fine with income because you wouldn't be investing if you had any money. Well, that's not true. There's a lot of people who are underemployed, underappreciated, undervalued in their jobs, and this is a problem for them. And if they don't get this one right, this was my very first step, and it's the first 2 chapters of my book deal directly with this. But say you're okay with your income. You say, but David, my problem is debt. I got credit card debt. Well, then you jump right to number 3 and you start from that point. So it's customized for that person. The other side is the 5 North Star principles. This is like the mental guardrails to keep you out of the ditch, keep you out of trouble. Okay. The first one is live on less than you earn. If you don't figure that one out, I don't care what any guru tells you, any author tells you, you're never going to succeed financially if you can't learn that first principle. And one last thing I want to tell you I do is every week. Have you ever read a book, Joe? And it was a great book. And you said, that's a life-changing idea in that book. I'm going to use it and make a big difference. And then 2 years later, you run across the idea and you go, oh yeah, I meant to use that. I kind of forgot about it. Well, that
Sure.
happened to me all the time. Okay. Well, this stops it. I take my compass every Friday afternoon at 3:00. I have a meeting with myself. It's on my calendar. And I go through where I'm at, where I want to go, my North Star principles to evaluate one. I remember once I looked at my North Star principles and I realized I made an impulse purchase that week. And it says right there, you got to wait 24 hours before you make an impulse purchase because half the time in 24 hours, you realize I didn't really need that. Okay. But here's the point, Joe. I caught myself at that meeting. So the next week and the next week and the next week, I wasn't keep doing those impulse purchases and being $30,000, $40,000 before you know it. And so that's what it keeps you safe is what it does. But here's a nice thing about it. People say, David, okay, I'm on the debt freedom point, but I need more information in a couple lines here. Well, then it says, go to chapter 4 in the book. And what you do is you just take out the book, go to chapter 4, and it gives you the details on how to get out of debt, different ways of doing it, ways that fit your personality and your level of debt. And this is like the 30,000-foot view. And this is the ground game. Turn right at the light. Turn right at the stop sign. When you combine these two, you have a financial clarity that few people ever get that I've seen in my experience anyways.
Sure. So it's not just a book or a page. That's a system that
No,
you have.
it is. It really is.
What was the sign that this that you when you knew that this system was going to work? Well, when was that moment?
This system of mine takes so little time once you get it in place. I literally spend 5 minutes a month on my investments. And what I
Wow.
do is when I get the money, when I pay myself, the minute I do it, I take that money and transfer it right to my investment account. That's it. Then I click out and I'm done. Okay, now I can focus on my business and building that. That's a lot more productive for me than, you know, doing all these Monte Carlo simulations and spreadsheets and forecasts. And who has time for that stuff? This is a set it and forget it approach. So you can take your life now and focus on the things that are important to you, your business, your career, your family, whatever it is that's important to you, and not be watching Wall Street all the time and listen to their garbage. And when I start seeing my portfolio start building and building and building, I says, this is working. Like nothing has ever worked for me for 40 years. And I got to say one thing that's kind of funny. Um, 1 year, and it was 2022, the market was down that year over 18%. I was pouring money in every month. I mean, it wasn't anything special. Every month I poured money in the market. Okay. But I mean, I put over 100,000 in the market that year. And you know what my balance was in my portfolio at the end of the year? It was less than the beginning of the year. And I put 100,000 in. Now, most
Wow.
people be panic and I'm doing a little jig. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, look at the deals I got this year. And guess what happened the next year, Joe? That's when my portfolio in 13 months, I think it was, doubled because it really, I got so many. My dollar was not buying one share anymore. It was buying more than one share. So when the recovery came, it really kicked in for me like, wow, nothing kicked in. And so when you understand that, and this is not intellectually difficult for anybody. Once you understand it, though, your whole outlook on the market changes and you have a peace, you have a calmness in you, and you see the results. And even when it looks like they're bad results, you know they're good results. It's exactly the system, exactly the method that you have designed that is working for you.
Some of the listeners are possibly thinking, well, David, maybe you just timed it right.
Yeah.
Maybe the market was down, it was on the way, it was in the trough, and you just hit it right. And here you are telling us this. How can I do that as a regular guy who doesn't really know a lot about the market?
Here's what I normally hear, Joe, because most of the time during that 6 year period, the market was up. I'm being honest. I'm not, here to lie or anything like that and play games with people. And most people say, oh, you were just lucky because the market was up most of the time. See, those are the people that have their thinking backwards. And just that statement tells me they're thinking. That's how I thought for 40 years. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm just saying because if you really understood the market and you're building and you're in an accumulation stage, you want the market to be down. You want it to be down as low. I was, when that 2022 year happened and it was down 18%, I was praying for another bad year. And unfortunately, it was a good year the next year. But I was just praying for that. So when people say that, it tells me right away, they don't understand the reality of the market. I don't care if it's up or down, Joe. I really don't care. I'm making money if it's up. I'm making money if it's down. I'm making money if it's stagnant. If you have a system that is automated and consistent, and you're going to do well. And I don't care what the deal is. Can I mention one question that a lot of people tell me?
Sure.
Oh, David, yeah, but look, you're making this good money. If I was making money like you, if I was making money like Joe, I could afford to invest. But buddy, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I don't have that kind of extra money like you guys have to put in the market. I barely am making it. Well, let me tell you why that's a lie. They know it's a lie because people, uh, pro athletes, let's just talk about them for a second here. The average NBA player makes over $10 million a year. I didn't say in his career, Joe. I said in a single year. And yet, after 5 years retirement, 60% of them are broke, according to the Netflix documentary Broke. And the NFL is even worse. After only 2 years of retirement, 78% of them are either bankrupt or in serious financial stress. And that's according to Sports Illustrated. Now, compare that to Dale Schroeder, a basketball-loving carpenter who made average to below average income his entire career. But he lived on less than he earned, the first principle right here, and he invested the difference wisely. He ended up with a $3 million portfolio. Joe, that's more than most of the NBA and most of the NFL players did, and with their tens of millions of dollars. what the compass showed me is a critical principle I didn't understand for 40 years. Making money is different than building wealth. Those pro athletes were amazing at making money. I mean, how many people do you know personally that make over $10 million a year? Probably not a lot of people, okay?
Sure.
But yet, most of them, not all, but most of them were terrible at building wealth. Dale Schroeder, on the other hand, let's face it, be frank, he wasn't that good at making money, but he was a master at building wealth. For 40 years, I was pretty good at making money. I made well above average income, but I was terrible at building wealth. So I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody. I'm the poster boy for what not to do when it comes to investing for 40 years.
You mentioned about making money on the upside, on the downside. Does this apply to every different strategy? Let's just say long game, shorting, any of these, or is it
Well,
all
well,
long game?
it's all a long game until you get about 5 years away from retirement. Okay, from age 20 or 25, whenever you start, to let's say you're going to retire at 65. And just pick a number. Okay, when you turn 60, then the game changes a little bit. But for that period, from 20 to 60, that 40 period, you're praying the market's down. But it's okay if it goes up. I mean, it's going to go up. I mean, in fact, historically, the market is up 3/4 of the time and down 1/4 of the time. So let's face it, it's going to, but that's okay. Up or down, you're going to be fine. You're going to make money, okay? But you make more money when it's down. Okay, but the point is this: when you turn 60, or when you're 5 years away, whether some people retire early, when you're 5 years away from retirement, that's when you want to start making a slight adjustment in your portfolio allocation and start getting into some bonds, fixed assets. Because what happens is when you start depending on your portfolio for all of your income, or most of it, I should say, okay, when the market's down, that's when you do not want to be pulling any money out of the market. You want to pull it out of your fixed, because then you're protected. You're not losing a penny, okay? And when the market's up, that's when you can take it out of the market. So you want that. But when you're not dependent on your portfolio, because you're in the accumulation years, I put all mine in equities, and I still do. I'm 72. Okay, so I'm not a little kid, but I'm investing like I'm a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, because why? I love what I do. I mean, I'm having a blast. My son's joined my company. Last year was a record profit year for us. This year is starting out super strong too. And I just love what I'm doing. So I probably will never retire.
Someone picks up your book and
Yeah.
they've never, let's just say, ever traded or put any money away. Does this work for them?
Oh my gosh, that's who the book was written for. Okay, basically for the non-financial person. When I read those 21 books, here's what most people think when it comes to financial books. Oh, give me a break. Financial book. Oh, give it to me before I go to bed. It'll put me to sleep. Boring charts and graphs and all these stupid terms no one even knows what they're talking about. And that's how most people think of it. And that's how I thought. When I read those 21 books, Joe, I'll be honest with you, most of them were as boring as heck. Okay, but they had good information. And I was so desperate, I stuck through it to get through them, so I get the good information out and pull it out. But when I wrote my own book, I said, I'm doing the opposite of that. I'm going to make it interesting. I'm going to make it full of real life stories of me and other people who succeeded and failed both, and would see both ways. And so people can really get it. And it's written more in a story form is as much as a financial book. Can I just share one quick review I got? I read all my reviews
Please.
because I think it makes a point what I'm trying to hear. This is from a clinical psychologist with 25 years experience. He was facing his own career crisis. He said the one-page wealth compass gave him the exact financial help and practical steps he needed. But here's what I like the most. He ended with this: I couldn't put the book down. That's exactly what was my goal, was make it so interesting that you forget you're reading a financial book and you just feel like you're reading a really interesting book. And so that's what it's about. It's for the non-financial person or the person who hates financial books. This is for you. Now, if you're a financial person, it's the same principles. It's going to make sense. It'll just be interesting to read. It's so boring to read, like too many of the books are.
Sure. So, what is one step from your wealth accelerator that anyone can start using today?
Well, the first thing I would tell people to do, people always say, what's the first thing I do, David? Well, there's no first thing for everybody. It's not one size fits all. What you do is you want to go down the 9 steps and figure out where you're at, and then you start right from there. And that's where you start. But let me tell you a common mistake people make, and it's really just too common not to touch on today when we're together. It's people are paying tiny termite-sized fees that are quietly, they aren't even noticing them until they do termite site destruction on their portfolio. So let me explain what I mean. Say you got 2 people, both in their 20s, say 25, they're starting out in their career. They both decide to put $25 a week away for investing for the future. Okay, it's pretty modest, $25 a week. Person A puts his money in a low-cost index fund with a 0.03% annual management fee. Person B goes to an advisor who charges a full 1%, which is standard, and they put him in an actively managed fund with an upfront load of 5.75% and an ongoing management fee of 0.66%. Okay. Now, let's follow these people for 40 years. They're now 65. Okay. They've been putting $25 a week in their investments. Person A's portfolio is worth $1 million based on historical market returns and his contributions every week. Person B, with the exact same contributions, exact same market, has a $570,000 portfolio. Same contributions, same market returns. The only difference was the fees. And those fees created a $430,000 difference. And that's assuming, Joe, they never got a raise. If we factored in a normal raise, that $430 difference could be close to $1 million difference, okay, or more. But here's the tragedy of the whole thing. Person B probably feels like, I got great service. I love my advisor. He knows my kids' names. We went golfing a couple of times. Little did he realize he did the equivalent of funding someone else's retirement with half of his own money. Now, I am not against advisors, but what I am against are products that enrich Wall Street at the expense of their clients' portfolios. And I'm embarrassed to admit this on your show, Joe, but for 40 years, I never questioned fees. I thought those were just the rules of the game. Okay, little did I realize that the rules we don't question can cost us the most. In person B's case, it cost him $430,000. That's a big chunk of money to take out of your retirement portfolio.
That's a huge difference. Wow. And if you like your advisor that much, just take him out to lunch. It's less costly.
Exactly. Be a friend. Join his country club and be golfing with him. Exactly.
So what makes your smart protection fund different than a traditional emergency fund?
Oh boy, now we're getting into controversy, but if that's okay, I like controversy. First of all, everyone says, well, let me tell you, maybe let us talk about something that isn't controversial first. It's the order that you do it. Okay. Here's what most gurus, especially the most famous ones of all, that we all know their names, they suggest. Get a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, which I don't disagree with that. I did it for years, and I think it's a smart thing to do. But here's what they say to do it. They say do it as soon as you get debt free. Okay, and I agree with that too. But they say, but do it before you even start investing. The first thing you want to do is you want to lock down your safety, get that 3 to 6 month emergency fund, then start investing. Well, I questioned everything when I did my portfolio, when I did my compass, because I couldn't afford not to. And I did the math on everything. And here's what I found out. If you're 25 years old and you do that method, and it takes you a year to get 3 to 6 months of emergency fund, which was pretty typical for most people. I think it would take them about a year, maybe more in some cases, okay? That means you're out of the market at 25 for a full year. Now, you take that money that you dumped all into your emergency fund at 3% interest, okay, for 40 years, all of a sudden, you're out $500,000, Joe, when you retire, because you waited a year at 25 to do this method everyone's talking about. Wait, here's my system, my compass, okay? I agree. Get out of debt first, because that's your best investment, getting out your consumer credit card debts. But then start your wealth accumulation and your smart protection fund at the same time. Okay, now you're not waiting a year, but you're still building your protection fund, but you're not waiting a year, and you're not being penalized by $500,000 because you waited a year. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? I mean,
Sure.
when I saw that, I thought a light bulb went off in my head. I goes, why are people saying that just because they've been saying it for 40 years? Didn't anyone ever do the math on this thing? You're still
Wow.
safety. You're still building your protection fund, but you're just doing them together. Here's why I say it's not a problem. You just freed up a bunch of cash flow because you're out of debt now. Well, before you raise your standard living real quick, let's get the emergency fund and investments going. Then once your fund is full, then you can raise your standard of living if you want to do that, okay?
What would you say to someone who feels way, way behind, or it's too late, or another 63-year-old who's in the same situation that you were? What would you say to them now? Because now you have the beauty of hindsight, right? Now you can look
Yeah,
back
right.
and say, I
Exactly.
could have done X, Y, and Z.
Well, I just remember that, and you've heard this saying, I'm sure you've mentioned it many times on your show, maybe, or other places. The Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. I'm saying this, it's never, ever too late. But I'm not going to get up here and lie to you, Joe. I'm not going to say everybody in 6 years is going to be a millionaire like I was, because that would be a lie. Some people are going to have more money than I did at 6 years, and some people will not have seven-figure portfolio. But I will tell you this, and I can say this with absolute certainty: you will be much better off than if you just kept doing it the broken way that so many people are doing it today. And isn't that an improvement? I mean, isn't it better to to be comfortable in your retirement, not to be stressed out? Okay, maybe you're not a millionaire, but you're doing really good. Okay, much better. So I say, if you're 63 like I was, or you're 53, oh my gosh, if you're 53, I wish I would have figured this out at 53. Man, I'd have another decade of investments. But it's never too late. It really isn't. When is it too late to follow correct principles? Would you tell me that? I don't know if there's ever a time that's wrong to follow correct principles. That's my opinion.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So, if listeners took just one action in the next 24 hours to change their financial future, what would it be?
It's this simple thing, Joe, and this is not self-serving because it's for free. Okay, go to my website, onepagewealthcompass.com, download this free one-page PDF, look it over, and say, where am I at right now, today? And how do I get to financial freedom? Well, it'll tell you whatever step you're on, and you'll see the steps before that to get to financial freedom. If you do that, that will be the simplest, most laser focused approach you can get from where you're at to financial freedom. There's no cost or obligation. Go to onepagewealthcompass.com/free and download it for yourself. Then if you say, David, I love this, but I'd like more information, then go to Amazon and get the book. It's a very inexpensive paperback, I promise you. This is not expensive at all. And now you have the two together, and oh my gosh, now you are unstoppable, I believe. I really do believe that.
David, share with us one more time. Where can people continue this conversation with you?
Absolutely. Well, I'm on most of the social medias, but the best place is onepagewealthcompass.com, because not only do you get the free download, I have a free blog, I have other free information, videos, that kind of thing. And then I'm also on Twitter. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn and TikTok, and also on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel too. So any of those places are also fine.
David, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your story, because this is important. It's wonderful when you can meet someone who's been through what we're going through and say, there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is an opportunity. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure being on the show with you. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone for listening. If this episode inspired you, share it with someone who needs it. And don't forget to follow Glovisor Podcast for more conversations on leadership, communication, resilience, business growth, and personal development. Till the next time.